Hello everyone, my name is Kelvin, and today I'd like to present about my physics lab 4, and then it's about oscillation of a spring mass system. So here's the contents of today. First of all, I will introduce the academic purpose of lab 4, and then we'll talk about some basic principles of physics, and then also talk about the practical plans, how I would conduct this practical of the lab. And then I will talk about my tracker calibration, which is a big part of this lab. Also the glow script coding, a big part also. And then finally, I will do some data analysis to compare about the theoretical and experimental model, and also talk about some further questions. So first of all, it's the introduction. So basically, the purpose of lab 4 is like we have to investigate the motion or the oscillation of the spring mass system. We have to use the Newton's second law and also the energy principle. So we also have to test them out to see whether those principles are real. Although we know it will be real, but we still have to test it out. And then also compare the real life and theoretical model produced by the computer. And then now I'm going to talk about some physical principles. So first of all is Newton's second law. As we all know, is F equals ma, and it is equals to the rate of change of momentum. So in this situation, we'll have one mass. So there's only two forces acting on it. First one is the weight, the gravity, Fg, and also the spring force by Hooke's law is Fs. So you can substitute Hooke's law and then you can get the equation. And then there's the energy principle, which is more important because in this system, we assume it's isolated. That means there are no external force acting on the system. So we can get delta E system equals to delta W, which is the work done of the surroundings, plus Q, which is the internal energy due to the change of temperature. And then it will become delta UG, which is the potential energy, plus delta US, spring energy, also plus delta K, kinetic energy equals 0. And then finally, we'll have some useful equations derived from Newton's second law, which we have discussed many times in the previous lab. Now I'm going to talk about the practical plan. So basically, in this practical, we are going to do a video calibration using tracker first, and then doing some glow script coding, and then compare the results and do some data analysis. But there are 4 points we have to be aware of. First of all, is the tracker. So when you're doing the tracker, be careful of the axis direction, or else your graph will be completely reverse in direction. And then you also have to do the calibration of the center of mass. We call it COM very carefully, because a small difference can lead to a big difference in the graph. And then also in the glow script, we have to be careful of the initial conditions because it's a key part of our code. And then also we have to use a specific value of delta t, and also we make sure the equations are all correct. And now I'm going to talk about the tracker calibration, about the spring mass video experimental data collection. So as you can see in this picture, the displacements of x relative to t and also y relative to t is all like a sine wave. So one is sine wave, one is cos wave. So after you calibrate it, you can collect all the informations, and then later in the code we have to use an Excel file spreadsheet. So at this moment, just copy all of the data from the x and y column. Remember, it's x and y, not t, and then delete all the titles and put them into a spreadsheet and insert as a CSV file. And then now I'm going to talk about the glow script coding. So the most important part of glow script coding is the initial conditions. And then, of course, we know that G equals 9.8. And how do we know about other thing? So if we look at the pre-lecture video, the mass of the ball is 0.402 kilograms. And then to calculate Ks, we have to use the period we find in the glow script calibration, and then use the omega equals 2 pi times m over k. Sorry, not omega, it's t equals 2 pi over plus like times the root of m over k. And then we can also get L0 like after substitution. And then for delta t, remember to use 1 over 210. And then after that, we can put in the energy equations and also the Newton's second law equations. And then we can start to our loop. So in our loop, remember to insert everything correctly, or else it will be completely different. So after we update every information, we can run the code and insert our CSV file. So as you can see in this result, the energy, there's a lot of types of energy, but in the left diagram, our moving path of the motion is like highlighted in blue. So it's like they're staying in the same area. And then we can see in the right side, there are a lot of types of energy, but just have a look at the orange line. The orange line indicates that delta E equals 0 all the time, which means the energy principle is correct. And then our result is very close to the theoretical data, so it's kind of a successful result. And then there's some potential error. For example, the real world is not actually an isolated system, so the work done by surroundings to the system can actually contribute to some difference of the graph. And then also when I do the calibration, I sometimes point the center of mass not actually at the middle part of the object, so it might cause some inaccuracies. And then finally, the initial condition is only the approximation because it used only some significant figure. So you can see there's a little bit difference between the red and blue curve. And then the energy principle is satisfied, as we just said, the delta E, the orange line always equal to 0. And then finally, the oscillation period. We can calculate the period first. So we times it by 3 because uh, we can find the average of the 3 periods, which is more accurate. And this is also a very useful tips in the experiment. And then we can see that Tx and Ty have different period. And then they will finally contribute to a different spring constant in x and y axis and also the different result graphs respectively. And that's all my presentation. Thank you very much.